The devotion to the Sacred Heart is rooted in a history, but it's also, I think, relevant to our times. It's both a combination of a time in which, and really several times, but when the devotion was really ramping up, it was during the time of what was called Jansenism, which is a form of Puritanism. And in a very simple terms, it's doing a lot that looks like then you're earning God's love. Part of the devotion was also in response to a lack of fervor, a malaise of people that were almost Catholic in name only. Does this sound familiar? And so a reaction can be just to kind of go overboard the other way, but you get so wrapped up in accoutrements and rules, and then you can kind of get judgmental about those other people who aren't being as fervent as I am, as we are. And then it's almost like reacting with the harshness of sin and apathy with a similar harshness. The beauty of the Sacred Heart and the devotion is that it does try to bring together the harshness, the pain of sin, the very negative consequences of that, and that is the crown of thorns, but it is wrapped around the core of who we are and the core of who Jesus is, which is a loving heart. A heart full of love and mercy. And that heart of love and mercy is something that is then what our hearts are to take on. Even in the midst of harsh conditions and our own tendency to be pretty hard on ourselves and thus hard on others. Part of the devotion to the Sacred Heart then is very much tied into the Eucharist because of that invitation to receive Holy Communion on First Fridays, certainly tied into the sacrament of reconciliation. But back to the Eucharist, I think what's so helpful with that is that part of the devotion is in reparation for sins, not only our sins, but for the sins of the whole world. If we're not careful, we can take on this spiritual work, if you will, in such a way that that's another way we're trying to sort of earn, not just for ourselves, but for a lot of other people, God's mercy. In the Eucharist, we make an offering of ourselves. And it's usually not just an imperfect offering, but it's pretty lousy. It's doing our best, but it's part of what the Eucharist helps us to do that better and better. But it's being joined to the perfect sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, in which his heart was pierced by the betrayal and the psychological abuse, and that his blood literally poured out from his side. And that perfect sacrifice is then joined to our sacrifice, and it is a perfect reparation for sins for the whole world. What it does to us, and then because the Eucharist is always more than just the people who are present at each Mass, flows into the world, is that it increases a desire for love, a desire for God's tenderness, a desire, a longing for mercy. And not only experiencing that in our lives, but then we are part of what carries that out into the world. And so, as we celebrate this and every Eucharist, but specifically in this solemnity, let us join our hearts to the hearts of Jesus, the heart of Jesus, and especially ask for an increase of longing for love and mercy in ourselves and in our world. And that the Sacred Heart of Jesus will then make our hearts holy.